All right. Feeling good?
Feeling very good.
All right. The podcast started. It started.
Not again. Not
yes,
this again.
It started already.
Gotcha.
I love it.
This is unsettling. I don't like it.
Settle in, baby, because this is the new format. All right. This is new
I honestly
camera
still can't
angles.
tell. Are we going? Is this
Yeah,
happening?
we're going. This is episode 161, movie podcast number 3,845.
Accurate.
Do you reckon
Well,
we
as
were that
accurate as
early?
George has been with the numbering.
Yeah, I just say numbers and just hope for the best. Julia's Eyes this week for Movie Book Club. That's my pick. I'm very, very excited to talk about the one because for me, I've got a bit of a tale with that one. So
Interesting.
a little bit of a tease for later on in the episode. Plus, we got some news this week. Benny, you're going to be filling us in later. Leigh Whannell's got some stuff cooking. We got some HBO news. Can't believe this has kind of been a bit of a sort of wasteland the past, quarter of the year.
Not surprisingly, though, considering.
Very
And
understandably.
We've got a question of the week, but let's catch up on what everyone's been watching. Just quickly before we get into movies, I was just saying to you, Connor, before how much Tenet was getting pushed on the UFC.
Oh my God.
They were a main sponsor.
It was, I mean, I guess they've done that a couple of times with different movies, but I think it felt really like poignant right now because you're like, you barely see any advertising for movies out there. It's just not as frequent anymore. Just so to have something like thrown in your face like that, you're like, I should go watch Tenet. Not sure why, but I should probably catch.
It was
that.
very integrated in the marketing, like
Yeah,
it
it was
was
nuts.
turning up again and again and again. So, hey, let's see if Tenet comes out later. But what do you feel has been watching this week? Because I haven't watched a single thing. I've been watching a lot of Lindsay Ellis actually on YouTube.
Hell yeah.
She's really good.
Really good stuff. Death of the Author. I think her 2 videos on that about J.K. Rowling. You know, as a Harry Potter fan, there's some really interesting layers to some of the arguments she brings forward. But I've just kind of been YouTubing this week. No, I'm really loving looking at you guys this way. I feel like finally I made it.
This is nice. Yeah.
I made
What
it.
about you, Benny?
So I actually haven't been watching too much either. I've been reading a lot.
No, you haven't.
Whoa.
No, you haven't.
I have.
Wait, reading what?
Like words?
Comic books count. They're
Okay.
covered in words and
They
dialogue.
half count. Yeah.
No, I've actually been plowing my way through DC's Injustice, which you guys might know as the tie-in comic to the video game of the same name, wherein Superman basically takes over the world. It's really, really dumb. Really dumb. Really thin justifications for why most of the superheroes kind of fall in line with Superman's idea of just a fascist world. But if you can go along with that and kind of pause your idea of who these characters are and what they stand for and whether or not they'd be doing any of this and just take it as this kind of alternate reality, Elseworlds, what if storyline, wherein Superman is just a very different character. If you take it as that, it's pretty readable and fun. And I actually just got onto year 3 today. And this I'm genuinely really enjoying.
Year 3?
Year 3 of the storyline, Injustice. They're going year by year.
Right.
It's like a 5-year storyline. And then I
Okay.
think they moved on to Injustice 2. The video game came
So
out as
each
well.
year is kind of like a graphic novel installment or that sort of...
I'm reading the trades, but I'm sure they did release it that way at
Gotcha.
some point. But yeah, it's really interesting because year 2 focused really heavily on the Green Lantern Corps and their involvement in the situation. Year 3 though is all about the DC's kind of magical characters and how they're dealing with this situation. Kind of Swamp Thing and John Constantine and all these other characters who I'm actually really interested in, and I think I'm kind of just figuring out myself that this is probably the part of the DC universe that interests me most, and Justice League Dark and all that stuff. And this part of the story, now that I've gotten over some of the thin justifications for other stuff, I'm really liking. But we're not here to talk about comic books, even though 90% of the movies we talk about are based on comic books.
I think we can talk about whatever in this little part because I'm honestly, other than Movie Book Club, I'm not actually watching that many things for some reason. But you know what's interesting about what you're saying is what I'm interested in is the kids growing up now, through the whole thing that's happening this year and all this sort of this massive shift we're seeing really accelerated. What kind of comics or interpretations are they going to be bringing forward in 20, 30 years time? Because that's what's so interesting about all these different interpretations. Superman taking over the world, you know, we're flipping that character on its head. You know, what kind of things are people going to be playing with in years to come, and the sophisticated ideas?
Yeah. I mean, the canon of these characters is always evolving and changing slightly, very slowly. It's like the Marvel universe is on sort of a weird distended timeline, wherein I think everything that's happened in the last like 70 years of Marvel comics or 50 years or something happens over about 13 years in continuity in the comic.
Right.
And you just have to kind of accept that the comics are always set in the present, whenever that is, even though time is passing very differently in them. But things do kind of change and get added. Like, for instance, something that as older fans who don't keep up with comics necessarily, we might not know, like Batman and Superman both have sons who are like very canon now. They're like generally around 13 years old, and just kind of major characters in the comics as well. So I get what you're saying. Like 30 years from now, what is that stuff going to be? Is Superman going to be Clark Kent? Is Bruce Wayne going to be Batman still?
But even just like what issues or what sort of the nuance of you know, like everyone's influenced by their surroundings, right? And that's why we see these themes come through, or generational changes, or little waves of, hey, this school of thought was coming through at this present time. Punk in the 70s or 60s in the UK, that was sort of like a thing of that. So yeah, I'm curious to see, you know, it's a very nuanced conversation that we're having now. And it seems to be that, you know, that'll seep its way into the next generation even more. Let's see, you know, stay tuned 20 years.
Yeah, we'll check back in.
I guess my concern is that like things are moving so quickly that it'll be interesting to see how the literature catches up, right? Because I mean, if you look at like more has happened in the last like 2 centuries than the last like, you know, 2 millennia.
Totally.
Right? Like, yeah, that's obviously a bit of hyperbole there, but like,
and to be fair, Batman comics from 2 centuries ago are really boring.
Really different.
No, but evidently there was like more people on Earth in the past like 20 or 50 years than there were ever before. You know, like things are accelerating on every single metric, including exactly what you just said. Like,
yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how the literature catches up, and like, you know, there are certain genres that hold light to kind of current situations a little bit more obviously than others, like, you know, kind of horror and sci-fi, and some of the more kind of hyperbolic genres always tend to exhibit those kinds of like cultural
reflection
of the time. Yeah, so watch sci-fi for the next couple of years. That'll be probably fairly interesting.
Yeah. Comic books are always really interested in tackling kind of the issues of the day in a way that their adaptations really aren't. So kind of along the vein of what you're saying, but interesting to see if these massive populist vehicles like the MCU ever actually get to the point where, you know, like in comics now, they're introducing like a lot of trans and non-binary characters and stuff, and bringing in creators to kind of usher those in. Whereas the movies are still lagging really far behind in terms of representation.
Don't you think that's because of the model? Like the model of movie theaters is like mass audience. Yeah. So we want to offend the least amount of people. Like the more people in the cinema, the better. You know,
and I mean, it's a numbers game for a lot of them. It's, you know, you want your main character or your set of characters you want people to say, that's me, or have some kind of association with that, or that's some kind of in-group. And I don't think it's a particularly good argument, but there's an argument to be made that, you know, from a marketing perspective, you want to hit the most amount of people. And, you know, a lot of these groups that are underrepresented because they're, you know, less than a certain percent of the population.
It's definitely way safer than it should be, though, from a marketing standpoint. Like, what's like the most groundbreaking thing the MCU has done? It's like 20 movies in, they made a movie starring a woman.
Yeah. Which is, and I mean, to be fair, this is why I say it's not really a great argument, is because people wanted those movies like 15 movies ago. Like the amount of people that wanted a Black Widow movie, and you know, for the people that think that you couldn't have made a good Black Widow movie, bullshit. Number one, they're doing it now. Whether it'll be good or not is a hard sell. Yeah, but I mean, you can make a good movie out of just about anything if you've got like good writers and good directors and stuff like that. It's you know, the materials there and all that. So yeah,
and they always get financially rewarded for pushing these boundaries. Black Panther, Captain Marvel,
Yeah.
like
And
boundaries. I'm not
also
saying
the-
they're pushing boundaries
the
necessarily,
investment-
but
A black man on the screen.
for them, you know.
Yeah.
the investment for a a comic book is much less than. So,
Although, having
we
said that-
can target different niches a little more effectively with that medium.
And market test ideas
Yeah.
and characters.
But I don't envy anyone that has to make those kind of decisions, because I reckon in Hollywood there's such a fine line between, including diversity and creating good characters and then tokenism. And like it's just this kind of really fine balancing act. And I
that's the
kind
thing
of
that
bristle when I see tokenism. I'm like, oh, this is like you're checking a box and you're thinking that this is the most interesting thing about this character. Let's get an Asian person in there. All right, what's that character? Oh, they're Asian. Let's not like that. That's a terrible way to define a character. Or let's have a certain amount of women, or let's have like a certain amount of minorities in a character. Like these people, that shouldn't be what's interesting about the characters.
Pretty easy generally to tell the difference, though, and I
Yeah.
think people do see through it.
Yeah, I think some people.
But there's a level
leap
of
to one or the other.
cynicism like that a lot of people have. That's like, oh, Black Panther. They're bringing
They're
that
trying to hit the
forward.
diversity card.
Yeah, and
or
it's
something
like,
that.
well, we need that. Like, there's a real case of we need to have conversations about different cultures.
And that was an
different
awesome
people.
movie. Like that was an awesome
100%.
story.
And like the more we can do it, and without getting to that tokenism thing, that's where we need to be. And it's a very where is
tough
that?
line.
Where
I
is
think-
that?
yeah.
But like what's interesting,
Write
about,
good characters.
again,
Actually, I will say that. Just write good characters, and then let the characters.
but let people from different cultures and different backgrounds tell their story,
Yeah.
and those different conversations will come through those characters. If the same people are telling the same stories, that's where we get to where everyone's fucking like when we're watching Adaptation. I was like, wow, everyone's white in this, and it's like it feels from a different era. But what I was going to say is that Lindsay Ellis podcast. That Lindsay Ellis episode where she's talking about Dumbledore and how she said after the fact, he's gay. And I've always been one of those people that's like, that's a really good thing. But then she said, but he's not in the text. Like if she was dead, like she's doing all this work after the fact. You're like, it's not in the text. Like, so she's sort of reverse engineering this thing to appear almost like virtue signaling without actually committing it to ink.
Getting all these points, even though
That's
it's
interesting.
literally not in the story.
It's literally not in the
Yeah.
story. It's not referenced in the story, but it's like, oh, here's this detail that appeals and is like part of this
You're
new
so
wave
brave,
of
JK.
conversation.
You're so brave
So
putting your
it's
neck
like,
out on Twitter like that.
I'm looking at it in such a different way now.
That's it. I mean, that's interesting because like it. On the one hand, I still do like that as a kind of thing of he's never given any kind of sexuality that I can speak of in the text, right? Like he's never said that he's gay or straight. It's just kind of he's Dumbledore, right? And that's kind of always how I thought about him. But I do kind of like that idea of saying, well, why does he have to, like if there's nothing there to point one way or the other, what's wrong with her saying that he's gay? I mean, it kind of makes it allows for a certain amount of normacy, I suppose, of like just if you don't just assume perhaps that he's straight. I mean, it'd probably be a safe bet, but like it's not a given.
But could you have like some little reference to it?
Which I think that they will do or that was their plan to do in the later on Fantastic Beasts movie,
Which is a load
that
of crock.
and,
It's a load of
Grindelwald.
crock.
Well,
Like,
you just hate
yeah.
those movies.
the fact of the matter is she said it after she published the 7th book. So that series was committed to tape. And then that was said. So that's for me where the problem lies. Like now, okay, yeah, we did Dumbledore, Fantastic Beasts. Okay. When did the last Harry Potter come out? 2007? It's a while back. I don't know. It's just an interesting argument that she brought forward. And I seem to be like really sort of like, wow, okay, I'm questioning a lot of things about how I thought about that.
Lindsay Ellis is really good at stoking the old brain flames.
She's
100%.
clever, man.
She's cool. Yeah, so what we've been watching, huh?
This is
I like
comic
this.
book.
I like this.
Just to dial it back a bit, just reading through Injustice, and I've said this several times, but it just makes me really mourn for the DC universe we never got and probably never can get because you can't actually capture. Like I don't think the MCU has actually done this either. But
that one you loved last year.
Yeah, that one.
Like the things are great, sir.
No.
You got the Snyder cut coming through.
I'm not talking about individual movies. I'm talking about a universe. Because what the comics do, which really does not get captured at all, and I don't think the MCU does it really either, is just actually have all of these characters coexisting with each other properly. Like the MCU is obviously the closest we've ever gotten and probably ever will get. But just reading the comics and watching even some of the animated versions of just seeing like this Justice League in action, I'm like, man, I wish we could get that.
Is there
in a better world?
Is there a TV series here where it's not like that CW crap, but we're getting, a bit more of a sophisticated.
You're just asking for a better version of the CW.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we already had it. It was Bruce Timm and Paul Dini's Justice League Unlimited animated universe.
Yeah, but like with real people.
Yeah, I know.
None of this crap animation.
Yeah.
I did watch a movie as well last night, one I've been very eagerly anticipating, Osgood Perkins' third feature, Gretel and Hansel.
Oh. On the OLED?
On the big TV, on the big fancy TV.
That was a good quality one, wasn't it? That was a 4K.
It's very nice. It was gorgeous.
Looking good.
And it did not disappoint. Obviously, I'm a massive fan of this guy, and I'll happily admit, probably very biased towards wanting to like his movies. The previous two being The Black Coat's Daughter and I Am the Pretty Thing That Live in the House, two of my absolute favorites. And this third one, I think, was a little more conventional, maybe by like Hollywood standards. It felt more like it is his widest release easily. It felt more like something that could appeal to audiences, but only by his standards, because it's still very, I could imagine it being off-putting to audiences all over. I absolutely loved it though. Unbelievably beautiful, really creepy. I love this guy. Yeah,
I'm keen for that one, man. Really keen for that one. So you similar kind of ballpark to what you've been doing with the other stuff?
So it's really weird because it feels at once very stylistically of him, but I feel like all three of his movies are all really different in significant ways as well.
Does this one kind of push them all apart a little bit more? Like when you just had the other two comparing them, it's like, oh, he's kind of this, and then that other one gets thrown in the mix. It's like, oh wow, these three are quite separate from each other. Sometimes I find that with bands or like, oh, here's this half of the films and this half of their discography or their filmography.
This one does feel very different to the first two, which I feel different to each other, because those on the production side had a lot of similar people involved. They were created very close to each other time-wise. Whereas this is a whole new thing for him, I think, shooting in a different country even. And it just makes me so much more excited to see his career going on from here. He's got another one coming out next year, so that's great.
Fuck yeah.
Cool.
Happy days. You guys been watching anything else?
My turn?
Sure.
I chucked this on actually a couple of weeks ago, but I've consistently forgotten to talk to you guys about it, which is It Comes at Night.
Oh.
Which is one that you were a massive fan of, Ben, I think. And the reason I remember that is because it's one of the reasons apparently that you didn't like Quiet Place, is that you felt like it was like a cut rate. It Comes at Night. I gotta say, I for that comment, I kind of disagree, because I feel as though this movie deals with some drastically different themes and different aspects of, a
post-apocalyptic world,
COVID world, or apocalyptic, one of the
COVID-19.
And I fucking love this film though. Like
That's
I think
incredible,
that
isn't it?
Just in all honesty, just the analogy that it is drawing, or just the kind of exploration of that paranoia and what are you willing to do, and the kind of zero-sum game that can lead to, I think is honestly, it's so well executed.
And the trust for your fellow man.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those. It's like that. Is the game theory of where, like, if you want to take something but they leave it, then you get it. If you let them have it and they take it, they get it. But if you both go for it, you both lose. It feels very much like that, just kind of stripped down to very primal, basic kind of bare bones type thing. And it's and just again, like the kind of the tenuous, you know, string that is the culture of the society that keeps us together. And like if it won't take that much to just snap it and have everything go to shit. So I loved that film. I thought that was really.
I wonder, have you seen it before?
No, this is my first viewing.
I wonder how I would take it seeing it post-COVID, because I think
It's weird.
there's such a fundamental paradigm shift in the way our generation will think. Like, we're going to be 80 and we're going to still be talking about COVID and shit. And these kids are going to be
Don't
like,
shake
"Shut
his
up,
hand.
Granddad."
What are you doing?
Yeah. You don't need to wear a mask.
Mhm.
You know, it's going to be one of those types of things.
COVID's really hitting you hard, huh?
I was gonna say
Yeah,
if this is like the generation defining thing, and I mean, it's probably not. Well, for a lot of people, it's gonna be really bad. But you know, I've been incredibly lucky in this, so I'm kind of like.
I mean, like,
I'll reap the benefits, of course. Like when I tell
I'm
my
reading some
grandkids.
horrible stuff about some post, you know, like some stuff that stays with you for months afterwards, maybe even permanent. So that's fucking scary.
Oh, if you actually get it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You don't want to
it's-
get COVID.
No.
There's enough COVID podcasts out there.
Yeah, sorry.
Boys.
Is it really?
We're going to get
There are,
demonetized.
of course, there's so many.
Oh yeah, makes sense.
A lot of really interesting ones too.
Anyway, so yeah, it comes at night. The other one I watched
choice.
was The Old Guard with Charlize Theron. You just mentioned that you want to watch it. This movie's bad. It's real bad.
Damn.
Interesting concept.
How did you watch this?
Netflix.
Oh.
It's a Netflix release.
Yeah. That
Um,
makes sense.
I just
What's the general premise here?
so the premise is that there's a bunch of warriors that are more or less immortal, and it's kind of in modern times, and some of them fought in the Crusades, and some of them were older than that, and
All right.
and all you need to know is that they go into battle with assault rifles and swords. And I mean,
If you think that's enough to turn me off something, you clearly weren't listening when I said I was just reading Injustice for the past 3 days.
I don't know. I don't even know how to like really encapsulate this film, because it feels weird to criticize, I guess, the realism or the like how real a film feels when it's about immortal people. But I think that there is a fine line between, like, I'll give you a really stark example. There's a scene where a bunch of people just unload, like just with you know, assault rifles. They just, you know, they
okay.
yeah,
Like you
yeah.
said, assault
Really
rifle,
glad that I
yeah.
finished off that, didn't you? And there's a shot of like all the casings, you know when like people reload and like casings,
The classic Matrix shot.
but it's a bunch of unfired rounds that drop onto the ground, like with the bullets clearly still in them, and then like a magazine that drops with them. And I'm like, how do you think, like this, it just seems like such a textbook thing to get wrong in an action film, like painfully obvious. Like things like that just set me off on the wrong.
I know. I can just see you sitting there being like, does not compute.
But I mean, I was like, it was
It's
just,
funny. I think across different timelines, those you can get away with certain things. Like maybe in the 1950s, you could get away with it not technical. Like you look at the amount of work that goes into like John Wick, with how much these guys trained. Like the reality, everyone's a lot more conscious of the reality now.
completely ridiculous
So
film.
Maybe 20 years ago would have been
Yeah.
cool, but now your
Complete-
expectation, your knowledge, like it's not satisfying you right now.
Yeah, and I mean, like when you have something like John Wick, which is, as a premise, again, fucking absurd. It's not that, like, they still take the time to make it feel tactile. They still take the time to make it feel real, or as though it could be real, even though it's fantastical and absurd and all those kinds of things. And then this one it didn't do that. Like there's like, you know, when you see a sword
Sounds awful.
that bends like mid like shot, and you're like, oh, this is just
There we
like
go.
kill me now. Credit where credit is due.
It's called fencing.
credit. Charlize Theron is pretty cool in this. In fact, I'd say most of the actors do a pretty decent job. There are some pretty like stiff dialogue lines and very by the books, kind of storytelling in general. For the people that I looked at some comments about it afterwards, if the people think that this is John Wick level action, I mean, you got to get out there and see more movies. Like this is
you got to get out of there and see John Wick.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, what are you talking about? Like John Wick is on such a different par than this movie. The movie does kind of dip into what we were just talking about, that like I think it's dangerously close to that kind of tokenism in certain aspects. Not enough to like hate the movie or anything like that, but it kind of does dip in that area where you're like, ooh, that's close. But yeah, ultimately I really hesitate recommending this movie to anyone. If you like those really kind of B-grade B-grade action films that Netflix seems to be putting out like a couple times a year, this would probably be that would create, or that would satisfy that itch essentially. But if you're looking at anything more than that, stay away.
If you're looking at something that I think must be better than at least how you're describing this one, I'm surprised you didn't check out Extraction, the Chris Hemsworth
I don't know why
one.
I haven't done that either. Like it's every time I see it and I'm like, I should watch that.
That's
and then
the better
I like
version of this one.
Yeah, much more of a man's film, Connor. It doesn't have a woman in the lead. You'll like it a lot more.
They load magazines properly.
in this, but I mean, like I watched what was that other
Chris
one?
Hemsworth did 3 weeks of training on it. Oh.
It reminded me a lot of what was that? The Ryan Reynolds one, Underground Six.
Oh yeah,
Six Underground,
Six Underground.
which
Oh, that was fucked.
a completely absurd movie, and like it's terrible. Like again, if
I
that's
watched the first half an hour, then I lost my mind.
yeah. So it's like that. It's like that.
Okay, that's
So-
horrid.
And there were aspects of that film that I did enjoy while
If
watching
it's
it.
a music video, fuck
Awesome,
3
yeah.
minutes of my life, great.
But overall, and they touched on the problem with
much,
Old Guard is
too
they
much.
touched on some concepts that were actually pretty cool, and I was like, "Ooh, this could be explored. This could be interesting." And they had an awesome monologue from I always mess up his name, Chiwetel. No,
Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Ejiofor. Is that how you?
No,
is that actually?
Yeah.
Ejiofor.
Is that actually
Yeah,
how
yeah.
you say his name?
Chiwetel Ejiofor.
You've said it like different 3 times.
That's it.
It's got some like good monologues from him, some good performances from Charlize Theron, but yeah, ultimately just very, very like subpar film.
Anything else, fellas, or should we get into this news?
I've only heard pretty much good things about that movie, so I'm gonna have to check it out.
That's why I
and
was
report back,
so
I guess.
weirded out. Like I looked at the Rotten Tomatoes comments and like on the reviews, and everyone's like raving about it. And, like, you know, people were on Twitter were being like, "This is the best movie ever since John Wick." And I was like, "Did I just watch a completely different film?"
I think for you, Extraction at least won't disappoint in the action front.
Yeah,
Like I
And look,
can't promise anything beyond that.
This movie, there are action scenes in it that are pretty cool. Like I don't want to take away from it, but I think I'm like it was when people started comparing it to John Wick. I was like, okay, this is silliness.
Right,
Like,
so you had an axe to grind. Are you talking about my boy Keanu?
I get again. Like I think I got off to the off on the wrong foot with this film with that like bullet thing, because then like all the like things that made this film feel not tactile, not real, not like at least set in this world. They just stood out that much longer. And then when you're wielding an axe where everyone is firing AKs, like at some point you're kind of like, okay, let's just.
That doesn't bother me at all.
Sounds cool.
I maintain though, just talking about like all those little details, I say this, and I think it probably applies to you, although I think you're maybe a little more detail orientated than the average viewer. Is that if you're really focusing on that stuff and that's what's really grinding your gears, then something else about the movie really fundamentally isn't working. Like there's something behind that.
Yeah.
Like if the movie was good otherwise, you wouldn't be like, there are bullets in those shells.
Yeah. If this is like, I mean, if you're going to do a stock standard action film in terms of plot, you had better be bringing your A game with it, other things, right? Which is why this movie is kind of disappointing, because it is a really stock standard action film plot, and they don't really do anything else.
Sounds horrible.
I also watched Federico Fellini's La Strada on the big screen. Do we want to talk about that for 45 minutes or?
Oh, I've got a Fellini. I was actually going through my Blu-rays because I got these big put all the Blu-rays in these.
That makes me sad.
Yeah. And I've got 8.5, which I've never seen before, so I've got to check
Ooh,
that out.
what are the 8.5?
The do we need to talk about Will Smith as well in the news this week and Smash Bros?
Wait, what?
Definitely not Smash Brothers, but what?
Will and Jada.
Will
like
No,
the-
we-
like the
no, we
most
definitely-
trending
we
thing on
definitely do
Facebook.
not need to talk about that.
the biggest movie star in the world from our youth is a cuck.
It's a headline, dude.
No, we don't.
No,
need
we
to-
don't
Are we putting that?
genuinely-
I'm going to put that in the
genuinely do not need
podcast
to-
headline. Will Smith is a cuck.
Whatever they want to do with their relationship is cool. I haven't looked
Yeah,
into it
it's
too much.
cool. It's
I thought
fine.
it was really interesting that they like just had their own private little conversation and video about it and released that. That's a
thought
cool
it
way to
was
address
like-
things.
I think it's
Unnecessary.
like
perhaps,
I think it was like putting light on like shit gets complicated in life, and
I don't need Will
Hollywood
Smith
Hollywood
and Jada to tell me that.
is squeaky clean, and like everyone thinks there's the perfect life out there, but you know everyone has their own path and whatnot. So
yeah, man.
I
And
thought it was.
You can take a look at the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation case going on right now if you want, if you want to follow that too. We're
Actually,
not getting
don't.
into any of this.
Don't.
At all.
It's unpleasant.
No more bringing up random shit you've been reading about on the news, George.
Hey, you
That's enough from you.
It's all your fault. You tell me these things, and then I go on these rampages.
Did you stick to the script?
All right, we got some movie things now.
Yes.
Actual
It's going to
movie
sound so
things.
much less interesting now that we're talking about that. So first up, you mentioned this on the best of the year so far episode we just did. Go check that out, everyone. Top 5.
Yep.
And I hadn't heard at that point, but Leigh Whannell is in final negotiations to direct Universal's Wolfman as Blumhouse joins the project as a producer. So,
So first up, like you called me a liar on the last episode.
I didn't call you a
No, we
liar.
didn't
I
call
just
you a
take it
liar.
back.
We asked
I
if
just
you.
Take it back.
I just
just like-
insinuated you
All
might
right.
be wrong.
Hey, all right, if we're being fair,
boy
it wouldn't have been the
delivers the
first time that you just talk absolute shit.
No,
from
but you've got to.
what was the most expensive movie ever made?
You got to believe me. You got to believe me.
You gotta trust him. You gotta trust him.
Law of averages say I shouldn't.
Anyway, I think this kind of cuts both ways. Blumhouse coming on, obviously, after the success of The Invisible Man. I think that's really, really cool, really fantastic. I was kind of hoping that what they'd be doing with these things is bringing in a different, new, interesting voice for each one. They announced that they've got Karen Kusama on for Dracula, which I think is such a cool choice. And Leigh Whannell was amazing on The Invisible Man. And I'm sure he'll do a great job with this, and I'm probably going to retract all of this when it happens. But I like the idea of having, you know, all these iconic properties with maybe soon to be iconic different directors on them as well.
I mean, that's a really cool vision, and I quite like that. If they're not going to go for some level of continuity, then I don't really see a strong reason as to why they would require the same director or the same kind of feeling. And I mean,
If he's got a vision, though,
well, that's what I
yes,
was going to say.
but-
Invisible Man, like that was a huge step forward.
And quite possibly, but just quickly, the site that broke this, I can't remember who it was, but they mentioned that their sources said that Leigh Whannell wasn't really sold on the project. And they somehow convinced him to come in. Ryan Gosling starring might be a part of that.
Okay.
And I'm like,
Yeah,
that's
see that?
less exciting for me. Because obviously The Invisible Man is something that he got done, that he had an idea for.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Is like we can go on all these like preconceived ideas. Like I'd love to have a director for each one. I'd love a director to do them all. Like we have everything neat and tidy. But if he's not into the project, that's what I want to know. Like is he signing up and he's like pumped for Wolfman? Or to hear that is kind of disheartening.
But the fact that he's jumping on
Throwing
means
the towel.
maybe
Throwing
he
the
just
towel. We're done.
he
We're
just
done
didn't have
here.
the information that apparently this is going to be amazing, and now he does. So
Well, how the fuck does that work? Isn't he writing the script or not?
no, the
No.
script is being written by Jason Blum's wife, I believe, and another co-writer.
Okay. All right.
I'm back on board, baby.
I just, I don't hold. I would love this universe or these set of movies to like be really good. I'm not gonna hold my breath. The more I think about it, the more I was kind of like silently hoping that they were gonna get that Universal Monsters movie off the ground, and I would have loved
Like
if
the
they had
Dark
stuck with
Universe?
it. Yeah. I would have. I kind of secretly was like, I don't care if the first three are pretty average. Just keep at it. And
Yeah.
Not many people considered those movies average, though.
Well, I mean, they weren't.
No, I'm a lot happier with Invisible Man, and hopefully this Wolfman's good. But yeah, you know, like it's untested waters.
That's a harder sell if I think about it, because if you have a shared universe, you can have the full spectrum, like some that are really good, some that are pretty average, some that are terrible, and like together they create this kind of shared awesome thing.
Yeah,
they do enhance
Whereas
each other.
The way that they're doing it now, which is they're all separate, they are going to kind of be measured or separately, or they're going to be on their own merits.
If Thor was a one and done movie connected to nothing else, no one would ever mention it
depends.
again.
How
it
do
would be,
they- it
it would be the
depends
most
on-
average nothing movie ever.
it depends on how they build up the overall brand. If they don't bring that really forefront, then yeah, each one's judged on their merits. But if they keep punching that through, keep going on about it year after year, release after release, the whole stock goes up and down. And people
So do you think it's just the brand, or do you think that there needs to be some kind of connective tissue between them?
connective tissue maybe in feel, but I don't necessarily. I don't know. If we need
I want
to
the exact
see-
opposite of that.
I don't necessarily know if we get, like, put it this way, like maybe like scope. Maybe I should call it scope. Like we're not going to get like the
Budget.
size mummy kind of thing. We're going to get more like an Invisible Man. Like Wolfman won't be like the Antonio Banderas one, or
Antonio Banderas.
who was that? No, that's Benicio del Toro, wasn't it? Jesus.
Oh, it's been a while, George.
Yeah, fuck. You know, that it's not going to be like that.
You meant to say Antonio Hopkins, who was also in that film.
film. I love Antonio Hopkins. Yeah, that movie sucked.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
I would be concerned at this point, after Invisible Man was such a success critically, with audiences, commercially, that
I get the
Universal,
It's vibe, you know?
Universal would come in here and be like, "No, you just got to put in a little reference to Invisible Man in there, just so they know that these are the same thing," and then also just like a little hint towards Dracula at the end.
Well, they kind of left this one off. Like I know they say that it's going to be one or its own thing, but they kind of left it off as though it could be.
And I'm not saying that's necessarily the worst thing. I would be interested potentially down the line of these things coming together. I mean, that's how the Universal monsters started back in the day. But I just don't want it to be forced on them by a studio. It feels like The Invisible Man was really a product of artists who were just trying to make a good movie with a small budget, and it really, really paid off. Just keep doing that. Just stick to the lesson. I feel like Universal got it right once after so many failed starts. Just stick to knowing what worked.
Who's been doing the Controverse? Is that Universal as well?
I'm not sure.
I
Top
can't
of my
even
head.
remember. Lionsgate?
I was going to say Paramount for some reason.
Disney. It's all Disney.
Shows how much we know.
Fucking hell.
We've just lost our podcast.
Get back to
card.
Will Smith's a cuck. I'm an expert in that.
Yeah. Oh, that's.
All right.
Sorry about that again. I have to apologize.
Yeah.
Woo.
Story 2.
We'll find out. Yeah.
It's got weird.
So next up, HBO Max is developing a TV spin-off of The Batman that will be produced by Matt Reeves and written by Terence Winter, the creator of Boardwalk Empire. The series will be centered around the Gotham City Police Department and kind of focus on just Gotham and all its corruption.
Sorry,
get the
I
movie
did that too
right.
soon. Now that you're done.
Cool.
How insightful, man. Like, that's some
just like-
revolutionary
I just think that's
shit.
a really boring take to have
Yeah.
on something that we know so little about.
All right, so
The creatives
this is,
involved are so interesting.
this is my
You're cynical. You don't take things on
I
their
am
own
cynical
merit.
at the best of times. But for this, I kind of feel like this universe feels as though it's almost oversaturated. And I mean, anyone that was worried about the
Batman or
MCU,
DC?
The universe of the movie that hasn't been made
for
finished yet?
Batman in general, like my
We need more Batman, in my opinion.
yeah, this is my problem. I don't need more Batman, and even off spurts. Is that even a word?
Stick with offspurts.
Offshoots that are happening now. Like,
Offspurts.
didn't they just have like didn't Pennyworth just come out now?
Yeah.
like that's an
That's
actual
CW.
thing now.
That's CW.
But I mean, it's all like it's just like it's
Pennyworth is amazing. It has a 6
Is it
season
really?
deal, yeah.
fuck you. That's
I don't think even the studio that made Pennyworth has seen Pennyworth.
but like
This is
we
produced
we
by
have
Matt
that.
Reeves,
Isn't it called Gotham? Isn't that pretty much what you're describing?
So Gotham is a series that got made. It was alternatively really bad and boring and melodramatic and soap opera-y, and also kind of insanely over the top and fun. It actually did a lot of really interesting things with the kind of the Batman mythos. This, however, I assume is coming from a much different place. And without having any further details than what I've just run through, whether or not Jeffrey Wright's Jim Gordon is going to be involved or Batman will be any kind of a presence, there is really fertile ground here in a very specific way, which is the GCPD comic book, which was kind of a long-running series of just kind of a police procedural crime comic that just happened to be set in Gotham. And it was terrific. It was so, so good. And I am completely on your side in that Batman is overrepresented in culture. I'm not a hugest Bat fan just because of that specifically. But I think something could be done with this. And if this movie is good and they're able to kind of tie them together, and the involvement of Matt Reeves specifically, I think could lead to that. I think this could be something really, the burgeoning DC universe.
Fair play where, it could be good.
More of a concern for me with this than any of that, because I think we can do something cool like that with the right people at the helm, is like in this post Black Lives Matter era, even Andy Samberg was talking about it with Brooklyn Nine-Nine. How do you do like a police procedural thing? Like you have to be very, very conscious of what's going on in the zeitgeist. So if you like
but
Andy
that
Samberg,
seems more like
if they
marketing
do,
than anything else.
No, definitely not. The piece itself. If Brooklyn Nine-Nine doesn't do something smart with this next release, they're not going to do it. And I think that's a great move on their behalf, because maybe you don't see it, but everyone is talking about how, like you look at the number of deaths in the Hong Kong protests versus the number of deaths in the USA. It's crazy. It's crazy. Like the police brutality, it's so crazy. And people are talking about it. Like whether you believe it or not, it's happening and people are talking about it and it's in the consciousness. It's in the zeitgeist.
And I've definitely heard about the optics of this series being created right now. And I think in its favor, if not necessarily tackling that issue head on, which is something they could even do. I mean, the series is heavily rooted in corruption, and the police force and Gotham kind of being rotten at the core in certain ways. So I think there's definitely interesting things they could say.
If they go down that path, which obviously they will, with Gotham, like Batman Begins, like there's all that kind of stuff. They've got their tentacles and everything. That works. That works. But I think they've got to be, they've got to be sensitive to those things when you're putting that much investment in something. You've got to have like a good, smart
from an
take
optic
on
point
it.
of view. It's. I mean, but by the time this actually got released, that's going to be what, at least a year or two from now. So I don't see that as being something that is going to be too.
I think this conversation's going to be more potent as time goes on. Like this is obviously like a very, very aggravated sort of like pinpoint of it, but this conversation is going to continue on for a long time to come. I think everyone's a lot more wanting to have these kind of discussions.
I think I agree, Georgie. Well said. I think just personally, I think back to the promise that quite bad TV show Gotham had before it was ever released. And I really do love the idea of the kind of feet on the ground, regular people trying to make this nightmarish city work and having these, freak of the week supervillain characters pop in here and there. And maybe every now and then you will see a bit of Batman, whether that's actually Robert Pattinson coming in for a cameo or, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. got Samuel L. Jackson a couple times, so anything could happen. But
and it's HBO, so
HBO Max.
They can pull.
Yeah, and HBO Max, they're really going all in on DC at the moment. And I think that's really interesting and really exciting because the DC...
They can get it right.
Exactly. The DC properties are so scattered all over the place right now in terms of what's going on. The CW universe, which I've dabbled with, so have you, Connor. It's mostly quite bad. But they have created a situation wherein there is a live-action multiverse in which all of these properties do kind of coexist. I don't know where I'm going with that, but I just find it kind of exciting because I'm in DC Universe mode right now.
Yeah, no, and they're all like fair points. I guess what I come back to is just I'm tired of Gotham. Like I just feel like there's there's so much, even if you were to stick with the DC, there's so much to do in the DC that I don't need another Bat-themed property. I just feel as though that is sucking the very soul out of the character. Like, just it feels so money grubby to me.
Yes, yeah,
Like,
and
let's just do another thing that's gonna make us money. Oh,
that's a big part of this. HBO Max is a burgeoning service. They need to get eyeballs and subscriptions. So that's definitely at the core of this. But I guess I think the final word just has to be, let's wait and see what the Batman is like before we can really decide if we're excited for more of that.
Yeah. And I had the same criticisms of the Joker. And, you know...
It's just Joker.
Whatever.
Sorry, it's my running thing. I do it every time you say it.
And that turned out to be a really good film.
Depending on who you ask.
Yeah.
All of us loved it.
And, you know, I still think it didn't have to be set in Gotham or anything like that. I think it would have been a perfectly good film just on its own merit. But, you know, maybe they'll do the same thing with the Batman.
Quickly, can you think of a title for that movie if it wasn't DC branded with any Batman characters?
Not off the top of my head.
Well, then you have failed, sir.
The Clown. I don't know. Clowning around.
We're living in a society. Well, next up, I don't think any of us have watched the trailer for Halloween Kills.
That's the next one?
That's the next one.
No, we just didn't do that. So let's move on.
Should we watch it live? Do a little live commentary on it? Let's all start it at the same time. Let's see if we can do it.
Is that how we're going to try and do this?
I'm going to do it. Yes. I'm talking.
We're doing it live.
We're doing it live, man.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
This is feeling very ambitious and not very practical.
All right, so what do you guys think of the Halloween Kills trailer not having seen it?
Who's doing the who's directing on this one?
This one?
David Gordon Green again, I assume?
This one?
I haven't seen it. I don't know.
Oh yeah, this would be
This seems about right.
this is continuing on from where Halloween left off.
Yeah. There's Laurie Strode looking worse for wear. Oh my god. So a bunch of firefighters are heading to a burning house.
Is that it?
Oh, who's that?
Okay,
Michael Myers is there.
that worked out quite well.
Yeah. Well, we managed it. I know it was riveting, but
It was stressful and
yeah. Well done, guys. I'm proud of us.
I'm proud of me.
All I can think of is just how silly that film ended up being. The end. There.
I love that movie.
Yeah,
I know
I
you
thought
do.
it was
The fact that
a fantastic
hated it
role
makes me love it
reversal.
even more.
I didn't hate it.
Yeah,
I never
you
said
did,
I
you
hated
did.
it.
You did.
Why do you think that anytime
We
I have
can
a
see it in
criticism
your
of anything,
eyes. You've got hateful little eyes.
why do you have to add little? Why is that a necessary part of that? I hate your beady little eyes.
So I mean, it's going to take place like immediately afterwards.
It looks as though, yeah.
That's cool. Like the situation's unfolding.
So
still.
yeah, so generally speaking, because the last one was so successul in being a
sequel.
reboot sequel.
Yeah.
Reseek.
Yeah. That kind of tied off the franchise in a fantastic way. Do you have any trepidations about them revisiting it again?
Most definitely. But I think if anything, Chapter 2 has told me is that I can compartmentalize this shit. Like when I was a kid, I used to like, the third one's no good. Now I'm just like, life fucks up.
I still enjoy number
there's a
one.
bump
Or I
in the
still
road,
enjoy, yeah.
I can still watch number one and get a massive kick out of it. And I say, see you later, number 2, in Chapter 2. I'm not going to watch you ever again, probably. That's how I approach things.
I can almost.
So
guarantee
if
you
Halloween Kills isn't as good or it's a train wreck, I have no problem.
I mean, if bad sequels or prequels
Wouldn't be the first time it happened.
Yeah, I was gonna say
know?
this franchise is like how many like Halloween films are there? Like, and there's varying levels of quality and
The one
and all
thing
that,
I will
so-
say that I think is the only minor concern here is the fact that I'm pretty sure Halloween 2, the original one in like the 80s, was the situation unfolding still. So it's exactly the same kind of thing where it's kind of continuing on. from where the last one left off immediately.
What I would love is because the last
I could
Halloween,
be wrong on that. I could be completely wrong on that.
the last Halloween was their second attempt at Halloween 2.
Yeah, after Rob Zombie.
So it'd be awesome if this Halloween 3 was terrible and then they made a new sequel to that last one just to make the most convoluted movie franchise ever made.
Keep skipping.
You know what? Why not? If there's any
Fuck
franchise to do that, this is it. Just keep trying it until you get it right.
They've already like broken through that seal.
Yeah,
Like,
just
the
fuck it.
sky's
Just be
the
like,
limit now.
and then you know how with the Star Wars universe you have people that say this is how you're meant to watch it, this sequence or all that. Then the whole debate would be what sequence or what timeline do you watch this in, and like, oh fuck, I would love that.
And then some madman in 100 years will make a new movie that makes them all canon somehow, and they all weave into each other.
Like an Endgame-esque time travel style.
Halloween Endgame, where the characters are just traveling through each different Halloween continuity,
Yes!
Oh my God.
collecting Michael Myers masks.
Yes.
And none of the time travel makes any sense whatsoever.
Not at all.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm pumped.
Let's wait and see.
pumped.
And finally, in the most exciting news of the week, Tron 3 is happening, starring Jared Leto.
Yeah. I didn't see that one coming.
No, so
who
it's
was-
like
who
they
was
took a
asking for
really
Tron?
unlikable franchise and a really unlikable star and just bashed them together and hope magic happens.
I really don't mind Tron 2.
A lot of people really dig it. I
I
think
know Jay
it's-
from Red Letter Media loves Tron 2. I mean, he knows exactly why he loves it. Like, he's not kidding himself. Like, it's not like a nuanced story or something.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Just loves the atmosphere, loves the music. The whole thing has just got a cool vibe. And that guy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, the Oblivion guy who's doing Top Gun
Joseph
2.
Kaczynski.
Kaczynski. Dude, Kaczynski's got some fucking visual, like,
Yeah.
he's got some, like, detail thing going on that's crazy cool.
Yeah, I mean, Tron Legacy has some of the best and some of the worst visuals ever, but that's not Kaczynski's fault. That's the de-aging on
That's ambition.
Jeff Bridges, yeah.
And a couple
Flew
years too
close
early.
to the sun.
But I mean,
and it
it's-
kind of works right in the fact that it's a video game. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
but not
ultimately-
in the, remember the flashback at the beginning?
Yeah,
that
that's-
shows him like leaving the sun in the real world. It's like, oh no.
You're like, oh, that's and that was actually that
makes
was
me
kind of
angry.
early days of that de-aging kind of thing. That was probably one of the first ones I remember watching, being like, "Ooh, wow."
So the Disney rep who kind of announced this, he did mention that they really want to get Daft Punk back, of course.
Yeah.
you would.
And that they want to get Joseph Kaczynski back as well, which I think would be a
Nice.
cool choice. Have either of you guys seen Tron?
Yep.
I watched it in class one time and I was so wigged out and I didn't know what the fuck was going on there.
Yeah. I've never seen it and I don't think I could.
I don't think you
That's-
should watch it,
it's-
dude.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Just
not.
watch the clips.
I don't want to do
Don't
that.
even watch. Yeah, don't even watch the clips.
You've
if I'm
seen the
honest.
light cycle clips, right?
Just
That's it.
just
Be
read
done.
the Wikipedia.
It's-
Be done.
Skim the Wikipedia.
I'm glad that I watched it when I was a kid and I was able to kind of absorb it in a more
Less critical way.
less critical, like more kind of naive, wonderfully ignorant way. And that kind of made me appreciate Tron a little bit because I'm like, oh, I remember watching that as a kid, and like I get to, but even then, like I'm as someone that is probably more happy with Tron 2 than most, I was never like, oh, I really need a Tron 3. This seems somewhat unnecessary.
There was an animated series that I believe was in continuity after the second one, and they were aiming to make a third one called Tron
believe so,
Ascension, which just kind of
I
fizzled out.
remember hearing about that. Yeah,
Yeah, so there must be some level of fan base there.
I'm sure there is. Yeah,
More so than even just people who like that kind of second one, but people who are actually into the lore and stuff. In so much as there is any, I don't remember
there
anything
should
about
be that much lore.
I know, yeah. But let us know, anyone out there, if you're really into Tron, because clearly we three are not.
And in Tron, not just in terms of like I liked the movies, but that you're really like, I don't know.
If Tron is your
Keen.
thing,
That is
Yeah,
a
keen
dope
for another one.
soundtrack, though.
Oh,
That
it is.
a
It's amazing,
dope-
yeah.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Tron 3 coming at you. Who knows when? who the fuck knows? Okay, question of the week. That's coming from me this week. Listeners at home, my question is to you. Are you on Movie Book Club Facebook group? I'm cheating a bit this week, but we got to grow this thing, man. We got to grow this thing. I want to see everyone that's listening, and I see the stats. Get in there. I saw Nick VD on YouTube because we had a couple of weeks where we weren't posting on YouTube. Nick BD, who's a regular listener, shout out to Nick. He said, hey, you guys are doing audio. Didn't realize that. So just spreading the good word. Movie Book Club is out there for you.
And we have a podcast as well. I mean, if we're just doing shameless plugging, the podcast is kind of our main vehicle of getting this out
if
there.
If you're listening this far, hopefully you're...
I mean, you might be on YouTube.
That's
my point. Yeah.
There's a podcast format.
Yeah. We are the podcast strikes back.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. So
add a comment.
Folks, it's a good time. We, it's a great place, Movie Book Club. So head on in there.
What a question of the week.
I liked it. I want to answer. I'm in the group.
Yeah, you are.
Okay, that was the question. Yeah. I'm in the group.
And honestly, I will say to that, I absolutely love seeing people's kind of responses to certain questions. I think I love it for two reasons. One is you're like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. And you kind of totally agree with them. But I also love kind of seeing some of the most bizarre kind of questions or recommendations.
Yeah.
You're just like, whoa, where did this come from?
Yeah.
How did you even find this film?
I have to admit something.
Tell me.
I hate Movie Book Club.
Okay.
My list of movies that I had to watch has grown from insurmountable to inconceivable. And I'm never going to get through it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
it's a fair complaint.
So keep it up.
Alrighty. Movie Book Club number 12, Julia's Eyes. My pick this week. The reason why I picked this one is I have a very fond memory of this one. I went to see this by myself in Leichhardt Cinema because, I had no friends, and my girlfriend at the time wanted nothing to do. I was like, let's go see. It was on it had 2 sessions, I remember, because it's a Spanish film, right? So it was 8 p.m. on a Thursday and something weird. And I was like, please, can we go? I'm desperate to go see this. I was such a Guillermo del Toro fan at the time. And it was like, nah, not a bar of that. So I went by myself, and I had such a great time in this. And now to come back to it so many years later, it's a very interesting thing to sort of think what did I love about this?
What did you love about this, George?
Well, I think what I really love about this film, and I'd love to hear your guys' opinions first, but I think, actually, why don't we go there? I don't want to set anything else up after that. You guys tell me, what did you guys think of Julia's Eyes? Because I have a lot to talk about here.
Yeah, so I liked it.
It's like when you give a pitch at work and someone says that and your heart just explodes in your chest.
That's to be honest, bro, that's exactly how I felt. Yeah. That's exactly how I felt watching the movie. I was like, wow, the pacing of this is really slow. I really want this to get more energetic.
I went about halfway through. I was like, holy shit, we were only halfway through this.
It's the
last 30 minutes.
Longest 2-hour film
oh my goodness.
I felt in a long time.
The last 30 minutes was like,
wow.
Oh, we are really
yeah.
There's another 30 minutes.
And I don't ever remember feeling that way when I saw it last time. What I loved about it was the sequences and this concept of this guy, this incel guy. Who's
it feels ahead of its time almost.
Yeah,
because that didn't enter really no one was talking about incels or that kind of really
toxic,
malevolent, toxic kind of mentality until the last, I'd say, about 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
So I mean, good on them for being ahead of the curve, I suppose.
So the concept where they sort of is sort of this spiritual concept of the darkness that they play with. And there's some funny shit in here what they play with this concept that I want to talk about a bit later. But, this guy, he has no lights. People can't see him and he just walks through these crowds. He walks past people that are actually looking for this guy. I just love that concept,
It is taking that kind of horror analogy type thing and just being really... very literal with it.
Extremely literal.
Yeah.
But I did kind of love that. And I also thought that the way, what really I remember from this film, I think the strongest part is in her apartment, in the guy's apartment at the end where the little girl is there. And, she, the whole sequence, the whole film is her basically kind of losing her eyesight to the point where she has to have this operation. She has the operation, and then the sequences after that where you don't see anyone's face. The way that's all shot, I think
Very
that
cool.
sequencing is really cool.
Yeah.
So what really struck me about this movie, and I went in with zero knowledge and no expectations. I did
Same.
think I was probably watching some kind of ghost story because Del Toro is just a producer of this, but he's very fascinated with the supernatural. And I feel like the other point of comparison I had was The Orphanage.
Yeah.
Also produced by him, a Spanish
Well, I
language
look
film.
at this in The Orphanage as like a little sort of two-piece.
But what I found really interesting about this and really relevant to me this year is, this is a movie about this like this psychopathic dude with severe mother issues going around killing pretty women.
Wait, why is this so?
With there's an admission coming. With kind of interesting techniques, filmmaking techniques at play. Just all kind of a slow burn, all really hinging on the suspense. It just felt so extremely Hitchcockian. And I've mentioned on the show a couple of times, I've been watching through Hitchcock's movies, one a week every week at the cinema that I work. So I could see how this movie could feel maybe a bit slow to some more modern eyes, but just kind of once I caught on that I felt this was really riffing on that sort of thing. And there's like such a specific like homages in parts to it, to stuff like Rear Window at the end. Watching it as like a modern version of one of those was really interesting and rewarding.
Yeah, and it's definitely much more of a thriller. I was sort of expecting more of a horror. And then upon watching it again, it's definitely a sort of, it's got that Hitchcock like, there's sort of these sort of little these sort of little mini arcs like Psycho. The main protagonist goes after the first 30 minutes, spoilers, and then this whole other story unfolds. There's kind of like a few of those little sort of chunks to this film that, I just thought they could have been just a little bit faster in some bits. Let's get to the meat, because when it gets to the meat, it's so good. Like those opening sequences, like where she's at the graveside and then she's sort of saying the words, and then the hand on her shoulder. Oh, he's over there. It's fun. It's actually funny watching how that's done, because she's like doing this really earnest thing. Husband's behind her. He decides to fuck off and go speak to the gravekeepers over there while she's doing her thing. And then this guy turns up. It's like...
I don't know how to describe this because I don't mean it as an insult, but this movie was really earnest and a little melodramatic. A little? And kind of... Yeah.
Very.
And kind of funny for it.
Yeah.
But not in a bad way at all.
That ending
it's going for it. You know what I mean?
That ending sequence was very melodramatic. Like this almost was like a love story kind of interwoven with a thriller.
Is this what all like romantic films are in Spain?
Yeah, that's what
being Spanish feels like.
Yeah. Oh, Dios mío.
Yeah. Like, so
Mi amor.
100% that earnestness, but it's kind of gets a bit grating in some parts. Like when she's having this really long-winded stories about her and her husband and stuff, and it's like, come on, let's show it, don't tell it, let's go. But that's the decision that was made, and that's the story that they told, and there was obviously an intent there.
Yeah, there was for points against it, and these aren't actual points against it, this is just context for me watching last night Gretel and Hansel. Osgood Perkins, the director, his stuff is just so pared back, and there's just nothing unnecessary and nothing over-explained whatsoever. So to see something more conventional like this, which is very much, more of a mystery suspense story that gets every beat is kind of explained, but in its favor, as kind of a twisty narrative. There were many points where I was just inadvertently kind of picking where it might go or what might happen. And I don't feel like it was doing anything either too ridiculous or too stupid or too obvious. Like all of the plot points felt, suitably engrossing as it went on.
Yeah, and that's what I think is so strong. The overall direction of this film is very well done. And the sequences like the rope the way she walks with her hand on the rope to the other house.
Mm.
Like there's a lot of cool, fun visual, the flash.
It reminded me so much of Gore Verbinski and David Fincher. The look, and that might just be the kind of the greenish filter on it.
Yeah,
but,
it's got that blue filter, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I had such a feeling of The Ring, which I kind of just watched this year for the first time.
100%.
And A Cure for Wellness.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
And just sort of like Fincher's like Seven and
But
Gone
even
Girl.
like, you know, when you rub your eyes and you get those sort of crazy colors and whatnot, like I thought the way the swirliness of how they did her losing her vision kind of, it's the closest that I've seen that visual representation of that, which is almost impossible to kind
And from
of.
a concept level, I thought it was really cool. I mean, just speaking about the eyesight, I thought the visual shots of her losing her eyesight were very effective. But just on a concept and like a mechanism or a way of kind of
progressing
getting
the
you,
story and
that's a cool way to do it.
Yeah.
I
was
know
a bit
about
confused about them going like she's blind, she's not blind, she's blind, she's not blind type thing. I was like, this seems a bit like all over the place.
I'm no
but-
scientist. I don't know about the veracity of blindness attacks, but you go with it. It's introduced very early in the movie.
And also, did the husband cheat in the end or
No. Well, I mean, you don't know, but like the
I don't think so at all.
But one of the things that I thought was a bit strange, and I wanted to hear what you guys thought about this, that the old blind woman that turned out to not be blind, that whole sequence, in all honesty, felt so unnecessarily gotcha.
Yeah.
Like, he's actually his son. Okay, I guess. And then, like, she's actually not blind. Okay, I guess. Like, why?
And this main character is actually an actress playing this character. It's like, okay, sure.
I like the concept of that. This is, you know, you're a product of your environment. You know, you sort of like the reason why the way he is because he had, his parents were abusive.
I suppose.
But then in terms of the context of the story, it's just another little sentence too long. You know, it's like that extra bit of fat that you didn't necessarily need.
And it was only brought up by this idea that like she had the son and like that he left her, and there was no particular kind of like.
Yeah, it was like
it didn't feel as though, and then she turned out to be like she went from 0 to 100, like she was like old sweet lady to evil, witch, out of nowhere with no real kind of like.
Yeah, there was no kind of like kicker to it, was there?
I think it was all worth it for like the injection in the eyeball that
Which
followed
wasn't
shortly.
even that gnarly, if I'm honest.
No, but I thought it was really well done. Like,
it looked insane.
I was like, that looks great.
From a technical point of view,
Yeah, and I think that alone, like, it didn't need to be gory or anything. I just think that alone in this kind of, not over the top world. Not well, in some ways it was, but I'm like that is effective. And then of course you've got the, I thought this killer was like just really lame, and I thought that suited the character because, like you said, incel, like kind of a loser. Like he was struggled at climbing over a van, and he got taken down by a little knife to the leg. But he also had the superpower to just like stab a girl through the head into a wall.
What I was about to say. I was like, oh my god, is it like it is a supernatural film? Like he's apparently invisible slash.
I'm like that's fine. That he can do that now.
That bit where he takes the knife out and the body just slumps down. I was like, wow, that was perfectly done.
That whole sequence I thought was fantastic.
Perfectly done.
I love the reveal of her in the wall.
Awesome concept of like her like playing that she's blind and that. But like, I just that
and how she fell in love with Ivan
in like a week.
It's like, okay,
forget my dead husband. You are now my.
Yeah. So
why are we Russian now? What happened?
Yeah.
That whole segment was, maybe this is my fault as a viewer, but I just found it distracting because you'd seen the nurse Ivan earlier at the hospital, and then it's going through this whole segment. And he's the main character in it. I kind of picked up later on that they weren't showing any faces whatsoever, but it seemed so clear that they weren't showing his face, which is obviously for a very strong reason. So I was just like thinking, I couldn't get too swept up in it because I'm like, what's the reveal? What's coming? But it was good stuff.
Yeah, I think, like towards the end where I literally was like, bah, when the police, he's like in the corner of the room at the end with the flashlights, and the police are like,
Don't look at me.
And I'm like, okay, listen, this is a cool concept, but fucking tighten it up a little bit, man. Like, Jesus Christ, like, fucking hell.
Well,
Like,
I was thinking that, and this is much less egregious because it totally makes sense. But the first person of him leaving the restaurant or the hotel or whatever
I
it is,
love that sequence.
and when they're all coming in and he just like walks by them. I don't know why it occurred to me because it makes sense that he'd just be able to leave, but just the way it was presented, like he felt like you could clearly see you're in the point of view of a killer and everyone's just like walking right by him.
Wait, so what do you mean?
I don't know. It just stood out so much. I'm like, I bet he's going to go out and he's just going to walk past everyone.
Right,
and then he did.
yeah.
I'm like, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, I like that, but you know that last bit where they're like, oh, where, and he's fucking there, dude.
But yeah, I don't want to hop on it because we already have addressed this, but like the inconsistency of his powers / his relative ability to do things seems like all over the place. Like
Totally.
when he was running down, cool sequence as he's running down the corridor and the lights are just following him and stuff. And then she corners him and there's no kind of indication that he's like this dangerous, stalker type thing. But, in certain scenes, he's like when they're in the apartment and he realizes that she can see.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I don't know, knock the dude out, like do something like.
Yeah, I was like, throw the boiling water on his face.
Yeah, like,
and smash his brains in with
what's
the kettle.
happening right now?
Like that's my plan. That's my plan. Use
That is
it.
good. I was just so happy it didn't go down the route of him drinking the tea that she switched.
Yeah.
Because I'm why would it didn't happen? So there's nothing to complain about. But I'm like, why would he drink tea at all in this situation where you have one poison tea and one?
Why take the risk?
It's like just don't drink it. But he didn't. So I thought that was really cool.
No, I'm thinking about his Emperor's New Groove with the poison for Cusco.
Cusco's poison.
But I think what is interesting to me about this film is, at that time in 2010 when this came out, we didn't have Netflix. I couldn't just kind of just consume this material. Like I couldn't just go download Julia's Eyes online. Like I had to go to the cinema and get it, and that made it that much more special. And I think like with how consumable everything is these days, the film's strength, there's something about, the kid that lived in the little town that had the little record store they had to go to. And they, there's some sort of, I have some sort of romanticism about that as I get older.
And you lose something, right?
Yeah.
Like I think to further the analogy with music, you get a lot of singles now, like really quick, digestible, single pieces of music. Whereas, you obviously still have albums today, but it used to be a lot more about making an album and presenting an album and like.
Well, yeah, you've got those albums from your childhood when you would only get a couple that you hear the end of one song and in my mind, I can hear the next song starting.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
before I remember I'm on shuffle on Apple Music, I'm just like, I'm listening to a different band now.
Yeah. And so I do get what you're saying. Like the experience is different. The appreciation is different. And there's lots of movies that I'll watch on my TV and think, meh. But if I see it on the big screen, I'm like, holy shit, that was amazing. And vice versa.
Yeah. So this is kind of almost like a reflection on that. And also, this film wasn't as good as I remembered it. Like, I think we've actually had a really good discussion because there is so much strength in this film. It's just like the fat around it needs to be trimmed up, and it definitely feels like a first feature kind of thing.
And you know what? For a cool little thriller horror, it's not a waste of time. Like
It does feel long though, doesn't it?
It does.
It does feel very long for a 2-hour film.
I wasn't too bothered by that. I quite like this. It's not so much my genre. I like watching this. I could really understand this as a George movie because it, reminded me of those other things I've mentioned. Those kind of more like serial killer movies and stuff, or like even Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or something.
Totally.
More of those thriller things. I wasn't disappointed that that opening scene seemed so supernatural when she like shines the light in the corner or the lightning flashes and there's no one there.
Yeah.
But I caught on very quickly and naturally that wasn't what was happening here. But as it is, I really think it's quite strong and polished.
Yeah. Cool stuff. glad you guys had an enjoyment there.
This director hasn't directed a movie since then.
I don't think so.
I think this is his second feature. I just quickly Googled him before. I think he's like a TV
Broke
guy.
him.
Broke him. This really well-reviewed movie.
Just fucking broke him.
Fucking ended
No,
him.
honestly, man, like I'm just doing a little video clip for my band that's coming out next week, and it's a fucking, there's a lot of work involved. Like, and that's a 2-minute video. Can you imagine doing this?
No.
Like, boof. So Movie Book Club next week is by the fans.
Yeah.
By the fans, for the fans.
And we're in the rather unique situation where there's a dead heat.
Yeah, but I think, is it a dead heat because we got to remove our votes, right?
Do we?
Yeah, well,
We're part of the group too.
Well,
We are absolutely. We have the most say in this because we have to watch
you
them.
do, and you get a week where you get to say. You know what I mean?
We've discussed
listen,
it. We've
put it
discussed
this
the
way.
solution to this situation, and I
Yeah, we
feel like
already
you're
know.
going off book now.
Yeah, we already know what the
I'm
solution
happy
is.
to do a double feature.
Yeah, so we've decided that we would do a double feature.
We got tied votes for each of the 2 top films, so
Yeah.
I suggested we watch both. I
Perfect.
think we're happy with that. Cool. So
So
we're
we've got
watching
Starship Troopers,
Paul Verhoeven,
and we've got Sorry to Bother You.
someone else.
I think that we should. I mean, this is for a future episode. I'm just throwing it out there. We should do a double feature, but that one that is like designed to be a double feature. I think that'd be really cool to.
You
like,
guys have no idea. Every single week, I want to suggest at least 2 movies that are relevant to the
To each
one
other,
I
yeah.
pick. Yeah,
we have,
I've
like-
tried to withhold.
Well, hopefully that's where Movie Book Club gets to. It's like, here's the main reading, and here's the prescribed
Extra
reading, and here's
credit
the
reading.
additional,
The
the
supplemental
extra credit
materials.
reading.
I did that with Florida Project.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true. You did actually.
Yeah, Tangerine. I said watch
play.
Florida
Yeah.
Project as well,
Yeah.
but
that's true.
No
Well, we
one's
got some
gonna listen.
Verhoeven, so you can go back to some Verhoeven, and Sorry to Bother You. I'm not sure what that person's done it, but listen, I'm pumped to see that movie. You saw it, said it was very good, so exciting.
I cannot wait to hear what you guys think of it.
Yeah, I'm keen.
Double feature.
Double feature.
Stay cool, everyone. It's been a pleasure. See you later, Connor. Any final thoughts?
No, that
Any
should just about do it.
proclamations? Any final proclamations, Benny?
I like turtles.
Oh yeah, that new Turtles comic looks cool.
Huh?
That new Turtles comic looks cool.
Which one?
The Ronin, where it's like the 3 of them have died and there's the one left.
Jesus, I'm gonna have to look
I
this up.
tagged you in this.
What? When? Prove this to me.
I tagged you in it.
All right. We'll discuss this off mic.
All right, find out next time if I did tag him. All right, see ya.
Bye.